Rita Silk Nonai is back in the Oklahoma County Jail today after a brief court visit this morning. Nonai surrendered to authorities early Sunday morning after the National Council of Churches and the Nonai Defense Council withdrew her bond. The National Council of Churches had supplied half of the needed $100,000. The council felt that Nonai was beginning to behave erratically and would be safer in a controlled environment. At a late afternoon news conference, her attorney said that constant publicity and recognition have led to severe emotional problems for Nonai.
The deterioration of Rita's emotional condition is in part due to the social pressure put on her by people surrounding her in daily life. She's been the object of overt threats, hatred, fear, and harassment during the time that she's been released on appeal bond. Public attention and recognition has limited her privacy and has jeopardized her physical safety. Rita's mental condition will only be healed if she receives treatment medically, psychologically, and spiritually.
Whether or not Rita Nonai will receive the type of treatment her counsel says she needs is up to the State Corrections Department. It always has been. Her counsel says they will petition the department to see to it that now that she is under state control again, she will be protected from the tensions that caused her problems and will receive the treatment to resolve them. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4.
We've tried, with the resources that we have at hand, to be helpful. We have not succeeded, either because of the nature of her illness or the inadequacy of the resources or some combination of those two things. And therefore, in responsibility to everybody concerned, we felt as though the best thing that we could do was to go ahead and pull the bail bond.
This is the old post office building in Edmond. This is the new one being built further north on Broadway. There will be plenty of traffic in the area. That triggered an idea. With all the traffic down Broadway, why not have a new downtown development plan? No prefab buildings allowed, just nice structures with trees and sidewalks. Any commercial businesses would have to meet certain regulations. The idea being to give downtown Edmond a certain charm and personality. So the question now is, under the new development plan, will charming homes like this one feel pressured to turn into commercial enterprises? A lot of homeowners are fearful that will happen, and so they're selling their property. But one of the people behind the plan says homeowners have nothing to fear.
Well, some of the people that put their home up for sale are there directly because the post office is there. The area is already changing. It has, for intents and purposes, it is commercial. They can see that they'd like to make more money off their homes and the sale of their homes. What this ordinance does in itself is upgrade the property and upgrade the entire area. It's some new and different proposals for the commercial people only, for guidelines for them to follow.
The City Planning Commission will make its recommendation tonight, and then it'll be up to the City Council to decide just how far it wants to go to preserve the original concept of downtown Edmond. Bella Shaw, Action 4 in Edmond.
Schools is non-conforming. It contains many more units per acre than would be permitted in the same district. In fact, it's also got commercial. So I'm prepared to go through the ordinance as you like. We state it again. reaffirm the goals of the 63 plan, Yosting, Walter Riker, Everett Garrett. They propose to go to Edwards, both 63 and 77 planning guides, as well as the initial charge, or the current charge of the council to develop
In December of 1978, Oklahoma County acquired a Rago compactor, and they paid $71,000 for this particular piece of equipment. Manufacturer's suggested retail price was $65,000. In May of 1980, Oklahoma County acquired a Rago roller and paid $18,500 for this equipment. Manufacturer's suggested retail price was $14,500. And I should point out that where competitive bidding is used on this equipment, that most often the price that a governmental unit will have to pay is several $1,000s less than list price, rather than being in excess of the list price. We also found between May of 1979 and June of 1980 that Oklahoma County acquired 12 Ford trucks at an average cost of $40,000 per vehicle. We discussed these trucks with two other dealers and received quotes from them on these same vehicles averaging $34,900. In May of 1978, Oklahoma County acquired a John Deere scraper and paid $82,000 for this particular scraper. According to the manufacturer, this scraper should have sold to a governmental unit for $64,000. In October of 1979, the county acquired a John Deere loader and paid $80,000 for this piece of equipment. And again, and let me show you here, and I have the documentation for all of these with me, the county paid, here on the lease purchase agreement, $80,000 for this particular piece of equipment. Using Title 19 of the Oklahoma statutes, we were able to look at the manufacturer's records, and we found out that this would normally sell to a governmental unit for $64,500. In fact, that's what the manufacturer's records showed. I want to emphasize that all we have alleged is that the prices that have been paid have been consistently too high. We certainly are not alleging that there is wrongdoing on anyone's part, and I want to make that clear with some of the other news stories going around. Our interest is in the fact that the prices here that have been paid have been excessive.
Mr. Adair?
In all of the equipment listed there, all I could place that I had purchased for my district was 6 of the Ford trucks. Now, those Ford trucks, we have this many bids. We have bids from 4 dealers on 3 different occasions on these Ford trucks. Now they can be spec'd out differently to where the cost can vary as much as $10,000 to $12,000. Now I contend that his specs, to begin with, are not the same specs that we were bid on, that these were. Now let me show you how things can change. The Ford trucks, say, were bought for $40,000 a piece. They were financed at 6% simple interest, and the county's money was invested during this time at 12 to 18% interest. When the average of 15%, we made $21,000 more on our money investing it and paying 6% interest on these notes. Now the dealer that sold the trucks was paying 15 to 22% interest, so he was losing money or having to discount his paper or costing him to do business. So there's $3,500 difference in the financing that we save by investing our money. One of the allegations that Mr. Daxon had made was about some Ford trucks that we sold that you read about. Now I contend we didn't sell those trucks too cheap. the man that bought them, we don't know what he did to them after he bought them. He cited two that brought the highest price. We contend that if there's any wrongdoing there, that he sold them too high. He sold them more than they cost brand new, and they were 4 to 4.5 years old.
Mr. Daxon, would you like to respond?
Well, yes, to a couple of things. First of all, the interest differential that was referred to, I think it needs to be pointed out that when the county pays interest on these agreements, that interest is tax-free to the bank that is holding the lease agreement, and therefore makes a substantial difference in the real rate of interest that they can afford to pay. Also, I would point out here, we drew up transactions for Oklahoma County, but Mr. Adair's signature is here with the other members of the Board of County Commissioners, the then members of the Board of County Commissioners, with respect to these transactions.
Mr. Adair, do you have a final statement?
I agree that they should buy as a body. I'm not familiar with most of what you're talking about and most of those prices. We sign them for the other district as a courtesy, one commissioner to the other. It's been done that way forever, and I'm not in a position to be able to change it. But I'm contending on the equipment I bought and sold through the years that the county has come out real well. Now, here's one thing I want to ask. Why hadn't Mr. Daxon released
the price at which governments usually purchase these items are substantially less. And we are hopeful that Oklahoma County will implement some purchasing procedures which will enable them, and as well as other counties around the state, to take advantage of the savings which would be available to taxpayers.
Mr. Adair, do you have a final statement?
I agree that they should buy as a body. I'm not familiar with most of what you're talking about and most of those prices. We sign them for the other district as a courtesy, one commissioner to the other. It's been done that way forever, and I'm not in a position to be able to change it. But I'm contending on the equipment I bought and sold through the years that the county has come out real well. Now, here's one thing I want to ask. Why hadn't Mr. Daxon released our audit report on
Shortly before 9 o'clock, Oklahoma City firefighters were called to the EMT service station at Northwest 17th and North Portland. Firefighters stayed busy for about 45 minutes, hosing down a propane tank. A truck driver had backed into this tank, knocking it off its blocks.
It ruptured a valve, and the 400 gallons of propane that were in the tank began to leak out. And there was no way for us to stop the leak safely, so we just had to keep water on the tank constantly to keep it cool and to make sure no heat was introduced in any way. Propane vaporizes when it hits air, and so it turns into a heavier than air vapor, so the vapor creeps along the ground. We've had to evacuate approximately 200 people from 18th, 17th, and 16th Street just to get them back out of the area.
Cooksey said the main reason people were evacuated was to reduce the chances of someone lighting a match or starting a car. He said any heat source could have ignited the vapor. All the excitement was over in less than an hour, and nearby residents were back in their homes. And this propane tank is on its way to a repair shop. Ben McCain, Action 4 in Northwest Oklahoma City.
Yes, except the judge's philosophy, of course, isn't the same as mine, but there's different schools of philosophy. And you have a judge that thinks differently than the judges in San Francisco do. I think that he's made some rulings that are grossly error, but those can only be corrected in a higher court. She's an honest judge, she's a learned judge, she's a capable judge. He's an Oklahoman that's very highly regarded here. If I'm a guest here, I have to live by the rules of the boarding house.
additional dollars. The board today accepted the recommendation from the OEA Legislative Commission.
We're very excited about the legislative program that we're introducing this year because we definitely feel that it meets the needs of public education in the 1980s in Oklahoma. We spent a great deal of time this summer studying where we were in school finance in the state of Oklahoma because we felt we needed to know where we were before we tried to determine where we should go. And we learned some very interesting things, but we did have some givens that we began our study with.
A home for this dolphin. Like you said, he looks like he's smiling all the time.
All the time.
Gene is busy on the telephones, no doubt.
Just look at these eager
The person to my right is not Linda, that's a dolphin. The person to my left is Linda.
Oh, it's nice out here today, isn't it?
Wonderful?
Now. And now, here comes another little animal.
Karen, grab that one, and I'll be over here
No.
having a Coke, okay?
I think we're not.
I'm Charles Schnetzer. About a year and a half ago, the building that stood here was destroyed by fire. Investigators blamed arson. Well, this building and several other buildings in this area have been hit, and the fires here are still unsolved. The area is between May and Pennsylvania Avenues along 39th Street Expressway. Over the past 2 years, there have been a number of major fires, many of them arson. Since June last year, there have been 5 fires at the Viva Hotel or the Prairie Lady Club. All are termed arson or suspicious. Another fire broke out in an office complex in the 2500 block. It broke out again after firemen put it out. In January, arson claimed the A&A personnel. Were the 2 men arrested last night involved? Fire investigators don't know.
We have no reason to believe yet that they may have been involved in any of those fires, but they were apprehended in possession of some explosive devices, some Molotov cocktails, and apparently intended to use them again in that general area. So a part of our routine investigation will be to see whether or not they may have had any involvement in these the unsolved arsons in the area.
Authorities say the men arrested last night will be formally charged tomorrow on possession and manufacture of explosives and possession of a gun. And for the time being, that is all they will be charged with. Charles Schnetzer, Action 4. It looked as though everything may have been go for council consideration of a proposed site for the trash transfer station on Memorial Road, a half-mile north of Portland, an ideal location according to a lot of people. But when the time came, Councilman Bob Franks, who was suggesting the site, withdrew his support, saying he had learned that a new housing addition was scheduled near the site. The consideration of the location was removed from the docket, the council was no closer to a solution, and one councilman appeared irritated with the constant delays.
I hope this council will seriously accept the responsibility and find a site and think about all of the taxpayers in this city. And I'll support any site that the majority of this council wants to come up with. And regardless of what site we come up with, and I said this in the beginning, there's going to be protest.
The council has delayed action on the question for 2 more weeks, asking for more information about a proposed location at Northwest 115th and Santa Fe, a site they had earlier rejected. They will look at that site again and consider more information on a location at Northwest Hefner and Portland at that time. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4 at City Council.
There's a distinction between criminal charges and the procedures for terminating a teacher from employment. The criminal charges are governed by criminal statutes and require evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. In a teacher termination situation, you're dealing with statutory grounds for termination, most of which deal with a teacher's fitness to teach school, and evidence must be presented beyond a preponderance of the evidence must be presented in such a proceeding. So they are different types of procedures, and there's different interpretations of the evidence to be involved.
We're suspect of the way that this entire termination case has been handled, and we intend to make sure that that his due process rights are not violated. We are not certain that he has been afforded complete due process to date, and it's as his representative and as a member of AFT, he will get our backing in making sure that those due process rights are afforded to him with whatever it takes.
A viewer writes in and asks, what are the duties of a person who has been named as an executor of an estate in Oklahoma? First of all, under the new probate code adopted last year by our state legislature, the terms executor and administrator have been replaced with the term personal representative. It is the personal representative's duty to essentially take control of the deceased person's estate and to preserve it from damage or decay until it can be distributed to the rightful heirs. The personal representative must also locate the will, take care of the necessary arrangements for probating the will, make sure the appropriate taxes are paid, and essentially oversee the distribution of the estate assets. Once the estate has been distributed, the duties of the personal representative terminate. However, he or she is entitled to a statutory percentage of the estate valuation as payment for his or her services. For Action 4, this is Ray Vaughn with Legal Briefs. Motorists who speed and rely on radar interference devices to protect them need to be aware of a new law that goes into effect on Thursday. Beginning October the 1st, it will be against the law for any person to operate a motor vehicle equipped with a device that jams or distorts radar signals or transmits a signal capable of being received by radar. It will also be unlawful to manufacture, advertise, or sell such a device. Any person convicted of such a violation can be fined up to $200. The law specifically exempts CB radios and apparently does not apply to simple radar detectors which do not transmit a signal. For Action 4, this is Ray Vaughn with Legal Briefs.
For the past 2 years, Roger Mills County Commissioner Ronald Hensley has been running road and bridge crews near Cheyenne. He says he's always been honest. But about 2 weeks ago, Hensley received some surprise visitors.
They came to his house and come in and wanted him to sign this paper stating that he was guilty of taking kickback and of mail fraud and defaulting taxes. And he read it over and looked it over, and he said, well, I can't sign that because I'm just not guilty of that. And so they told him that he had to sign it because they had proof that he had done it. And he said, well, I haven't done it. And he wouldn't sign it. So then they told him if he didn't, they'd come out and handcuff him, take him to Oklahoma City, and throw him in jail, and he wouldn't be able to post bond or get out until the grand jury convened. But they didn't do it.
Here in downtown Durham, local residents don't have much use for the FBI or the IRS. Local folks come down here to the Durham General Store to talk about their favorite commissioner and how they feel he's being harassed out of office by the federal government. Folks in Durham believe Hensley is honest. They've chipped in more than $13,000 for his defense fund. The farmers and ranchers in rural Roger Mills County say they'll stand by their friend no matter what.
Everybody here thinks he's about as honest a fellow as they ever knew. He grew up in this country, and everybody's known him all his life. They think he's an honest man. And he said he didn't do it, and they all believe him.
Folks in Durham say they don't object to the probe, just to how the FBI has handled it. They say that if other commissioners were harassed like Hensley, they can understand why so many have quit without a fight. Scott Wallace, Action 4 in Durham.
Sit back down in the car.
I'll see you. Wait a minute. Yes.
I'm Sue Lauer. Tax cuts may be welcome for some, but they're causing real headaches at the state legislature. Today is the first day of the new federal fiscal year, and in a special joint committee, members of the House and Senate tried to figure out how the tax cuts would affect state and local programs. Since the federal grant changes aren't final for many agencies, state planners don't know how much money they can depend on, or even where it will come from. Community Action Programs, or CAPS leaders, sit watching their coffers run dry.
Many of the CAPs are continuing to operate on fiscal year 1981 funds, and when those run out, which is what they'll start running out today for some CAPs, that they may not have block grant funds and they may have to close their doors.
State officials have been talking about the budget all day, and they're still confused. They don't know how much federal money they're going to lose or when they're going to lose it. But one thing is for sure. The state of Oklahoma simply can't afford to pick up all the slack that's been taken away from federal budget cuts. And as one governor's aide put it this morning, the impact will be serious. Sue Lauer, Action 4 at the state capitol. The pilot and passengers tried to stop him, but 17-year-old Gaylor Carrico was determined. He jumped out of a helicopter to his death late last night at the state fairgrounds. Officials say Carrico had attempted suicide the night before. This time he succeeded. Today things are back to normal at the fairgrounds helipad. Eager riders pay their $6.25 a head for a spin around the park. Ride workers were shaken by the tragic accident, but they aren't to blame. They're glad customers are still coming to their rides.
We're still giving rides. People are still coming in. We're just watching them just a little bit more closely.
There's not much anyone can do to prevent accidents like this, although the pilot and passengers did their best last night. Workers here at the helicopter ride say they're glad last night's freak suicide didn't scare others away who just wanted a ride for the fun of it. Sue Lauer, Action 4.